Do you feel that it was implied because you're not eating properly that you're now in this position?
So for someone to come, into my space and tell me what I haven't been doing and that this disease is my fault, it's so incredibly traumatizing.
The diagnosis literally affected each and every aspect of my life. There you are, you've been married for years and there's still no baby.
There are devastating effects to living with PCOS, but today's guests are here to share their stories. Let's unpack. Kirsti Leaf is a law student and radio DJ currently residing in Cape Town. Having struggled with irregular menstrual cycles and cystic acne growing up, she was diagnosed with PCOS at the age of 18 and is living through the many challenges that the condition brings. Entrepreneur and social activist Tlhompho Makgwe was diagnosed with PCOS at the age of 22. The diagnosis has impacted her journey to conception, having undergone numerous procedures and medical treatments. These are their stories. Let's unpack. Tlhompho, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, really.
And then joining us via VideoCon, we have Kirsti. Kirsti, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this chat.
So, Tlhompho, I'm going to start with you. Maybe explain PCOS or PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. What is your understanding and how would you explain what PCOS is?
PCOS is a condition, it's a hormonal disorder that 1 in 4 women have in South Africa. It has a diverse number of symptoms, and it's not just that you have one symptom and you're diagnosed with it, but it's mainly caused by hormonal imbalance and it leads to insulin resistance. Later on, causes infertility as well.
But at some point, your ovaries have cysts on them.
Yeah.
So on a scan, you'll see lots of little bubble-looking like things.
Yeah. So one of the symptoms is your ovary is bigger than it should be, either one or both ovaries, and they are surrounded by cysts. And so it makes it difficult for you to ovulate because the ovary is surrounded by cysts.
Kirsti, how would you explain to someone what PCOS is?
So I think the really interesting that Tlhompho mentioned is that, there's such a diverse amount of side effects or symptoms, right, to having PCOS. Every woman is going to have a different experience. It's so hard to put your finger on it. It's so under-researched in the medical field especially. So it's really difficult to even be diagnosed. So many women are told that what they're feeling is just a part of growing pains or being a woman, but actually it's something a lot more serious and doctors can't tell that. But for me, hormonal imbalance for sure. I personally have an excess of the male hormone. So it's all about working to get my estrogen up so I can have that sort of balance. It's also a metabolic disorder and it can lead to, like Tlhompho said, infertility, but it's not always the case and there are ways to live with it and to manage it.
So in terms of your own journey, what were the events that led up to your formal diagnosis? What were you experiencing that you thought something is not right here?
Okay, I was a 22-year-old lady and my periods were irregular. I would stay about 8 months without periods.
Wow.
But then at that time, I'm not fussing about anything. But it came to a point whereby it was really worrying. And my now husband, he was a boyfriend back then, we decided to actually have this checked out. We were not actively trying to have a baby. However, it was just not happening. My initial worry at that time was, why is it that my periods are not regular? And I went to the doctor. I went to a gynecologist. They went through a scan. They checked my ovaries, my uterus, blood tests, everything. And he did say my ovaries, the size of my ovaries are abnormal. and I've got cysts around my ovaries, and I've got excessive hair growth. I had, it's the main 4 symptoms of PCOS, except for the hormonal imbalance. At that time, my hormones were actually balanced. And that's when I got diagnosed. I went for a second opinion. They said the same thing.
And what did the doctor explain to you with regards to your symptoms, as in like what is possible and what can be done?
He did say that a lifestyle change may decrease the symptoms. I might actually get better just by changing my lifestyle. However, he said because I'm still young and my symptoms were not that bad, chances are the day that I do decide I want to fall pregnant, I might not struggle as much as a person who's older would struggle. So at that time, I was relaxed and I was like, oh, cool bananas. I mean, let's roll. And I wasn't trying to fall pregnant at that time. So
what did the doctor mean by lifestyle change?
So basically, when you have PCOS, the recommendation would be you change your diet and you exercise often, which is at least 3 times a week. However, I recently also read that cardio is not good. Some say cardio is good. Some say cardio is not good. Kirsten mentioned something that it's a condition that is still a mystery to most doctors. And the diet change would be no sugar, no carbs, which is almost impossible when you're staying with a Limpopo man, for instance. So it's really, so yeah, it would be no sugar, cut off sugar, alcohol, and carbs.
Kirsti, on your side, I mean, what was the build-up, the events that led to you getting your formal diagnosis?
So, I mean, I actually didn't even notice that anything was wrong, to be honest with you. I think when you are growing up and you're young, when you do notice any issues, people kind of put it aside as, you're just growing up, your body's going to regulate itself. So I did have irregular periods as well. And when I was 18, I was first year in university and I just thought I should get myself checked out. Like that's the responsible thing to do. Take care of my reproductive health. And I went to the gynecologist and I found out that I had this condition. And it was easily the most traumatizing experience of my life because there's such a lack of sensitivity around the PCOS diagnosis and because it's so under-researched. So the gynecologist was so cold to me. She literally said, listen, you have this condition. You have to do A, B, and C. So she put me on the pill. She said you have to lose 10% of your weight and, get on an exercise and eating plan. And she sent me off. And she said, if you don't do these things, then you probably won't have babies in the future. Wow. And obviously 18-year-old me is devastated. I'm confused. This is not something we learned about at school. We didn't speak about it at home. So, immediately it feels like, you're at fault. And I think with PCOS, it's so misunderstood that it's often looked at as like a lazy girl syndrome or like a lazy girl disease. And my whole life I've been so active. I was a professional dancer. I played provincial sport. So for someone to come, into my space and tell me what I haven't been doing and that this disease is my fault, it's so incredibly traumatizing.
Do you feel that it was implied that because you're not exercising, because you're not eating properly, that you're now in this position?
100%. She didn't even look at my history, what I do on a daily basis. There was no sort of real regard for my context and my lived experience. It was really like this textbook definition of how she thinks she could fix it. And it was me getting a second opinion and getting the same thing. And it was only until I went to an alternative medicinal doctor where I found out that there's so many other ways to treat the root cause of PCOS. And there's ways to understand it more that I think Western doctors and traditional medicine doesn't understand.
So what were some of the other symptoms that you're experiencing other than irregular period?
Yeah, so it was irregular periods. I had excessive hair growth, and I was like, "Oh, I have Indian genes. It's fine. Like, it's nothing serious, you know." But that's actually one of the symptoms. Another thing was, mood swings, anxiety and depression, weight fluctuations, so weight gain, weight loss. You could work really hard at the gym and still not see results, and that's because your cortisol level rising. Women with PCOS really struggle with stress management, and their body doesn't respond to stress in a healthy way. So our body just goes into panic mode when we start doing lots of cardio, and that's the first thing a doctor, suggests we should do.
Did you experience the same thing? Because even though you didn't respond immediately to the doctor saying, do this, lose a percentage, or whatever the case may be, did you experience difficulty in taking what the doctor had ordered?
I can't say I did take it in, and I'm one person that I take the punch now, and then I'm that type of person that I will be okay, so what now? But she's right. I did make little life changes, and it wasn't easy. In fact, with me, I gained weight. The more I went to gyms, the more I gained weight, and it gradually the scale gradually went up. So yeah, she literally narrated my story as well, how it actually went.
And how frustrating was that for you? I mean, was weight loss something that you wanted for yourself anyways? Or did it feel like, now this doctor's prescribing something to me that I didn't even have an interest in?
You know what? The diagnosis literally affected each and every aspect of my life. Because even generally in your relationship, should you have a disagreement, you end up saying, oh, it's because you know that I might not, have kids. Oh, it's because I gained weight. Oh, it's because... But when you're alone and you're now calm and you self-introspect, you actually realize that no. I shouldn't have reacted that way. So it did actually affect me. It did affect the way I saw myself, my self-esteem. However, my life took a turn for the best after that because what the condition taught me and the, how do I say, the approach that I chose after that has also helped me throughout all other aspects of my own life.
And I'm going to come back to you on what all of those other aspects are. Kirsti, I mean, you were quite young when you discovered. So now you're 18. Did you go back to the woman in your family or your mom or siblings to say, this is what I'm going through? Is this something that you also have or have experienced?
I mean, I'm grateful to come from a family that's, very open. My sister was the first person that I spoke to, and she was really, really supportive, as well as my mom. I think the only difficulty really with having a conversation like that is because I think as a young person, talking about the gynecologist is such taboo. I think for our moms and our grands, they only really went to the gynae when something was wrong or when you're trying to have a baby, So I think the real difficulty came in when it was like disclosing like, hey, I went to get a checkup. Nothing's wrong, but this is what they found, I mean, my sister's 10 years older than me, and we had a conversation, and the first time she went to a gynae was, into her late 20s. So that was the only real thing we had to work around. But I mean, once they really understood what I was going through, I mean, they were so supportive. My mom's been helping me with my treatment. She's made things so comfortable for me in terms of my lifestyle changes. So yeah, I'm super grateful.
And for you, I mean, how did your partner, boyfriend at the time, take the news, and did he really, was he able to truly grasp what was happening? Because it's one thing for a doctor to say this, but what you're feeling, you may not be able to articulate.
I was also fortunate enough, I still am. My partner was amazingly supportive. And I was fortunate enough for him. I still think maybe it's because of the profession, because of his profession, rather. I was with my mom when I was diagnosed, and she also has a medical background. So it made it quite easy for me because they said to me, we've treated so many people with this condition. It's just that people don't know. And it's treatable and you'll be okay, you'll be fine. So it made the wait a bit less for me. Just their reaction, none of them panicked. If anything, the criticism that we do get as ladies with PCOS is from society. Because there you are, you've been married for years and there's still no baby. People that see you, now you've gained weight, now it's the first thing that they notice about you.
And they greet you that way.
And to us Africans, it's actually a compliment. It's a way of making conversations. When are you having babies? Oh my goodness, you're so big. Have you seen yourself, And to them, they are actually making conversation. And it took me a while to realize that, no, they don't mean bad. They're saying it, some of them actually say it with good intentions, and it's just innocent. But it doesn't make it right either. Because I can't be, oh, hi, yes, I have PCOS, by the way. No, it's not that I don't want kids. I am trying, but I'm struggling.
So what do you think the stigma is around? Because I'm sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that the first time you ever heard about PCOS when you got your diagnosis?
Yes.
So you'd never heard about it before?
I knew that there were women that could struggle to fall pregnant, but it was the first time I heard of polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Kirsti, when was the first time you heard about PCOS?
That day in the gynecologist's office when I was 18. That was the first time. And the most insane thing is that I started speaking out about it once I had, finally come to terms with my diagnosis. I started speaking about it, on my social media platforms. And the amount of women and young girls that were telling me that they've actually had the same diagnosis or they've had these symptoms and no one was speaking about it. I think that's the thing with PCOS. It can feel so isolating. It's because nobody's speaking about it. And we're not sharing as women what we're going through because the whole idea of you not, being able to fall pregnant is like taboo, or it makes us feel like we're, less of a woman. The changing point for me was when we started having more open conversations in, our communities about what we're facing as young girls.
And it makes it difficult just as women, even though we think there's a sisterhood, is there may be some kind of shame that comes with PCOS. As you've already mentioned, Kirsti, you felt like it was being implied that it was your fault.
1,000%. I think we beat ourselves so much. We beat ourselves up so much. As women, we try to be as perfect as possible and do everything by the book. So, when you're as young as you are, when you're getting a diagnosis like that, you think, where could I have possibly gone wrong? And I think it's really important to remember that with PCOS, it's literally just genetics. There are a bunch of environmental factors that, can contribute to you getting a diagnosis like that. So it's honestly never your fault, ever.
So you and your husband then were trying, for kids after you got married. Take us through what that journey's been like for you and the struggling with fertility.
It's been a roller coaster. So, of course, when we started, we still believed that we could conceive naturally. But it wasn't happening for years, we just thought, started with supplements, then treatment, which would be to stimulate ovulation. We moved over to IVF. The first 2 times we failed.
And what does that mean? As in, it didn't take?
The first time I didn't respond to the treatment at all. And the second time, the transfer didn't stick.
And just maybe share for the viewers what you mean by the transfer didn't stick.
Okay, so
in as biological a way you can.
Okay, so IVF is basically they take out embryos from my ovaries and they fertilize them in a lab. They then transfer them back into my uterus. So
egg that's been taken from you, fertilize outside, take the embryo and put it back into your body, right? And then what was not taking is that the embryo does not attach and start to grow to become a baby.
Yes. So that was the second time.
And so the first time,
I didn't respond to the hormones that were meant to grow the eggs.
Okay, as in the production now was not happening.
Yes.
Okay. And second time then was the embryo not taken.
We were a step further, yeah.
Yes. So basically you do a pregnancy test at some point and you're not pregnant.
Yes.
Okay. And I mean, IVF is not cheap.
It's not. It's not. The first time was so devastating because a few thousand rands later, they tell you we have to cancel the cycle because you're not responding. And
yeah. And when they extracted the embryos in the second attempt, did they put some aside or the ones they were putting in, that was it?
So when they extracted 12. So what happens is that every day they update you with how many embryos you have left because some die along the way.
Yes.
I ended up being left with 5 that were viable. They transferred 2 and I was left with 3. They froze the 3. But the 2 didn't stick. I took a break for a few months. That's when I went for the 3rd time. I changed doctors and I went for the 3rd time. I went to a doctor that was actually well known on the support group because I joined a lot of support groups, which actually makes the journey better because you get exposed to people on a similar journey as you. And the 3rd time, we lost 1 embryo when they were defrosting it, let me put it that way. And I was left with 2 and they transferred the 2. Fortunately, I fell pregnant, which was last year with twins. But I lost them as well. So...
And how did you lose the twins?
I lost the first one and I wasn't even aware that I was miscarrying. The week of my stepdad's funeral.
You were how far along at this point?
3 months.
3 months.
Yeah. And I just saw brown discharge. But at that time, I didn't think much of it. I thought, it's a funeral, we're using the toilets, and maybe it's just something light. Went to the doctor, and I had lost the 1 baby. To a doctor, it's an embryo or it's a...
Yeah. But to you, it's a baby. Yeah.
And I was just grateful that the other one is left. I was like, okay, because they had separate sex.
So they were not identical?
No, they were not.
Yes.
I lost the second twin 2 months later. I didn't lose it. The labor was actually induced. It was a scheduled scan. We went to the scan and, my husband was even saying, the baby has grown. We were all excited. It was a boy. We were happy, almost 6 months. And the doctor went to the head and he said, we have a problem.
And what was the problem?
There was no brain. The brain didn't develop. And he said, we have no other choice but to. When circumstances are like this, we terminate because the baby might survive, but once you give birth, it will die. And I gave birth to my late son. It was a traumatic experience. But yeah.
When you give birth in circumstances like that, because you're not, and I'm not sure in terms of medical terminology, but in terms of real life situation, you're not going in there saying, I'm going to go deliver my baby. What is the mindset you're going in there with? Because you understand what is happening.
At that point, I had literally blocked my whole pregnancy experience from my brain. I had told myself that this is something that I have to do. Because in the doctor's rooms, he said, you guys can go home and go and think about it. And then when you're ready, call me and I will book the theater for you. And I said, no, book it now. Let's get it over and done with. So I walked in knowing what was going to happen and I was okay with it. I think for me, the treatment that I got at the hospital is actually the one thing that made things really bad for me because it was my first time being pregnant. It was my first time giving birth. And I was expected to know the do's and don'ts. So for me, the birthing experience was horrible. But I had made peace in a way.
And you, the birthing experience, is it natural? So you actually have to push.
I had to push.
Wow.
And at some point, the nurse said to me, remember when people give birth, the baby is trying to come out and the mother is pushing. So in your case, you are making the effort alone. So you really need to do this double, because we struggled. We struggled to get him out. And I eventually did, and they put him there next to me for a good 2 hours. They asked if I'm going to have a funeral or not, and I chose not to.
Did you want to see him?
I refused to.
So why did they put him next to you if you didn't want to see him?
I didn't even know that he was there. I became aware that he was next to me only when they were taking him to the freezer. That's why my whole experience in that hospital wasn't so nice. But I had to... What I took away from the experience was, at least now I know my uterus actually works. So whenever people were like, we're so sorry, I was like, you know what? It was my first time ever being pregnant. And for me, that's a big deal. So that's actually reassuring for me, and I'll hold on to that.
And I think that is another way to look at it, is that in your journey of wanting to become a parent, that it's a bit of hope, even though it's coming in such a painful tragedy.
It is.
I think the saddest part is that is an aspect that many people don't talk about. Like, people will not know that even if your pregnancy is no longer viable, as the medical term would be, you actually have to still go through a giving birth experience, knowing that it's not this exciting end of a journey. You're going to hear the crying. You're going to, have the baby on your chest. You understand that it is almost the end of the road for that part of the chapter for you. In terms of anything else you experienced with the birthing, were there any other symptoms or any other things that you experienced because of the PCOS or because of the pregnancy?
Okay, so after giving birth, I left the hospital, and the one thing that was surprising for me, I was not prepared for it at all, was milk coming from my breasts. I didn't know what to do with the milk, but it kept on coming. However, I received treatment to stop the milk. A few months down the line, my hair started falling off.
Wow.
Which was weird, because I've always had very bushy and beautiful hair. And I have hair in places that I don't want hair. But my hair started falling off, and I had to learn to embrace it, because I'm still struggling to have my hair grow back naturally and as it did before.
And when you asked the doctor, or did you ask the doctor about the hair loss, and what did the doctor say?
I haven't asked my doctor about the hair loss, because for me, I just took it. It was expected. I always saw on our support group women asking for remedies for hair loss, but I never thought it would happen to me, because I grew up with beautiful, beautiful hair, and here we are now. Rocking bold.
Yes. Kirsti, I mean, you are still quite young. Have you had any thoughts or reflections on wanting to be a mother? And I don't know what you think, or what you maybe like to share about what you've heard Tlhompho share with us.
I mean, I would love to be a mom. It's one of my biggest goals one day. I want to have a big family. I come from a big family, so, naturally I want to have lots of little kids running around. But I think, two things I've been kind of grappling with as I get older. I think there's so much pressure on us as women, because it almost feels like our sole responsibility is to reproduce. And we're just looked at as these like reproductive, vessels. And, there's so many alternative treatments nowadays. So for me, it's coming to terms with the fact that it's in God's hands. The things that I can control now, like, not smoking because that can, exacerbate your PCOS, having certain lifestyle changes, which help you to have kind of like a holistic, well-being, especially in terms of your reproductive health. Those are things I can control, right? But, the next 10 years, what happens, I can't control. And like I said, it's never your fault if something does go wrong when you have PCOS. So separating, I guess, my purpose and realizing that I'm not broken or defective if I do get to a point where I want to have kids and I can't. Because so many other things. I'm intelligent, I have a career, I'm an academic. There's all of these things about me. And if I want to make kids, I will make a way to have them. I don't see my PCOS as a defect. It doesn't make me broken at all.
Mm-hmm. Having gone through what you have gone through with regards to, the fertility journey, falling pregnant, losing your babies, is it a journey you still want to continue on?
Definitely. Definitely, like Kirsten said, there's more to us than our fertility. At the same time, the journey, how far I've come, makes me so much more resilient. And I'm still so young, and I'm going to leave no stone unturned, because God has given doctors the intelligence to be able to give us solutions. And I feel like society needs to be more informed about the options that we have, more accepting of the options that we have. I mean, I've had people call IVF unnatural. I've had people call IVF so many things. However, a car is not natural, but we utilize a car. So God made a way, and I'm going to make sure I walk that way.
Kirsti, is there anything that you'd like to share with the viewers in terms of PCOS and maybe your journey as well? Something that might surprise them, that they may not have ever thought is something maybe that you struggle with or have to deal with?
100%. I think, the first thing is that people get such a shock when I say I have PCOS. Because I'm, this very confident person, and I always present myself a certain way. But honestly, self-esteem is something I really struggle with, and it takes a lot out of me sometimes to get out of bed. And, women with PCOS, they're so much more likely to experience body dysmorphia. So, my confidence and my self-esteem, it's constantly fluctuating. And I think what I want the takeaway to be is that it's not this linear process when you're trying to figure out your PCOS. Like it's been said many times, it's different for everyone, and every woman is going to have to figure out what works for her. Some women respond well to cardio, some women don't. Some women respond well to yoga or weight training. So I think just be gentle with yourself, be patient, allow yourself to figure out what your body works. Do not listen to doctors. You know your body best. If you feel that a doctor is not giving you the best solution, try every avenue. There's alternative medicine that deals with the roots of your PCOS. And I think as a young girl, it's so incredibly, crippling to be given something like birth control with all of these insane side effects and have no idea. I mean, culturally, birth control wasn't something, it wasn't an option growing up because we were more on the conservative side. So to be in university and to be given birth control saying that this is going to fix, your hormones, it actually made them worse. Because you must remember that pill is synthetic hormone. So every month when you're pill, you have a synthetic withdrawal bleed. It's not actually your period. So women can be on the pill from as young as 13 years old, and they come off of it when they're ready to conceive and find out that their body hasn't been working as they think it has. And there's a huge misinformation about that. So I think if you are someone who has these symptoms, if you've been diagnosed with PCOS, take your power into your own hands and do research. Thankfully, there is a lot of stuff on the internet. There's a lot of treatments on the market. And just back yourself, man. I think it's so easy for doctors to get it wrong about our lives, but nobody knows your body better than you. So own that.
And And for you, final words for the viewers that you think they might be surprised to know, maybe something that can be a key takeaway for the young woman that might be struggling as well with PCOS.
For me, would be, like Kirsten said, one should establish their own way of coping with it, or managing it rather. I put my mental health first before anything else, because I don't want to pour from an empty cup. And the changes that I made in my life are changes that I knew I would able to sustain. So I don't want to put myself under pressure. No one deserves to be cornered, and no one deserves to be made to feel like you're less of a woman just because you have a condition that you have no control over. So women must be kinder to themselves. They need to do research on their own. They need to be aware of themselves, physically, mentally, and emotionally, because this condition is not just a physical condition. More than anything, it's a mental condition, because it takes so much of you mentally and emotionally. That's where you start before you go to the physical part. And only then, once you've established your stance, can you really know where to go? Because there's really no one size fits all for this condition. We all have different treatments. We all have different approaches to PCOS.
I'd like to thank the both of you for coming through and speaking about your experience. I think it's so important to just raise awareness for some of these silent battles that many women are fighting. I mean, it isn't spoken about enough, and there's very limited understanding on PCOS. So thank you so much. Kirsti, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was honestly such a pleasure.
Tlhompho, thank you to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
#Unpacked with Relebogile. Knowledge really is power. You've learned about it today, and maybe you are a young woman that is dealing with this. Ask your doctor the questions. Find another one if you're not winning, and also use these ladies as an example that you can live with PCOS and you can thrive. And, sending love to those of you that are struggling with fertility because of PCOS as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night. Next time on Unpacked.
I told him that I am bisexual and I want to explore that side of me. That's when we came to an agreement that, okay, we'll have a goal that we'll be both sharing, because he didn't have a problem with having 2 girls.
Luckily, the first person that we went for is the girl that I was looking for.
The original girl.
The original.
Yo, guys, your story. Thank you so much for watching Unpacked with Relebogile Mabotja. Make sure you subscribe to my channel where you can get to watch more episodes. But more importantly, you can be part of our online community. Comment down below, share with us who you'd like to see on the show, what story you'd like us to discuss. We love engaging with you. Keep it coming and don't forget to subscribe.